Hello, Ryan here. I'm starting a new series on how to brew beer, and we'll work through different methods of doing it, and different styles, and just different processes. And in our first episode of the series, we're going to be doing something called extract brewing, and more specifically, it's pre-hopped extract brewing, where we're going to use a can like this that includes all of the sugars from the malts as well as the hops are in here, and then we're going to add other brewing sugars to get us up to our alcohol that we want in our beer. So some of the things you'll need are a pot to boil water in and some method to boil that pot. I'm going to use my induction cooktop here just because it's easier to show you. Some way to stir it. You can get a long paddle like this or a spoon. It doesn't really matter. And one of these is nice, a little pitcher for moving water around, as well as a fermentation vessel like this. We have a little bucket here, as well as a lid with a little hole to put an airlock. Also, you'll need some form of sanitizer. Sanitizers are important because they kill bacteria that could otherwise ruin your beer. I personally use a product called Star San. There's a lot of other options out there. You can even use a diluted form of bleach if you want to, but it's a lot more work and a longer waiting time, and you have to rinse that stuff. So I do recommend finding yourself a no rinse sanitizer. Star San is the best in my opinion, so use that. Also, you might want to find yourself a beer. Now, if you're watching this video, you probably don't have any homebrew yet, so I suggest that you just go buy a beer at the store. This is actually a home brew. This was brewed using a method called all grain brewing, where I actually had to extract the sugars from the grains myself. So I'll put a link below on a place where you can get all this stuff. I'm not being paid by them. It's just a good one-stop place to get all of this, really. Pre-hop kits are kind of hard to find in the U.S., at least in my area. So I have to go online to get them, and even sometimes they're out of date. But other countries, they're much more prevalent. Like the Cooper's company actually comes from Australia. So I know a lot of people use them there. A lot of people use them in Canada. But United States, a little harder to find. You generally have to go online. Amazon, among other places. So let's go ahead and get started. So first thing that I'm going to do is boil 2 liters or roughly half a gallon of water. All right, so we're gonna let that boil. I'm going to take this is a mash paddle. You could use this in all grain, but it works for this as well. I'm going to actually submerge it in my Star San. I have a 5-gallon bucket down here with Star San. And so I'm going to put all my stuff I want sanitized in there. And what I can't, I'm going to actually use a spray bottle. So put this in here. The airlock. Also, I did forget to mention that the important ingredients of beer are malts, where you get your sugars from, hops, which add that bitterness, and you need yeast. Now, this can has all 3 of those ingredients in it. So the yeast is actually in the lid, in the little packet. Oh, they glue these down now, I guess. like this. So you do not want to get this hot, too hot. It will kill the yeast. So I'll show you how to deal with that. Also, I do recommend putting the can of malt extract, because this is a liquid, a very thick liquid. Put it in hot water so that it will get a little runnier, so make it easier to pour. So I'm going to use this big pot. I'm going to put a lot of hot water just from the tap. It works. You don't need to boil water in it. But you can also just put it in your sink. I'm just using that pot because my sink isn't all that clean right now, so I kind of forgot to scour it before starting this video, so this pot will help and do just fine. Also, I do recommend you get yourself a thermometer of some sort, whether it's a dial thermometer. I like to use this instant read. That way you get an idea how hot this water is, and later when you go to pitch your yeast, you're going to want your whole mixture in a certain temperature range. And also, we don't really need to boil this whole lot for a long time. I just want to get my malts and sugars in there so that they will dissolve. We won't be doing a long-term boil. So once it gets dissolved in there, we'll move it to our fermenter. As for the water that you're going to use, tap water is just fine, as long as your water is good enough to drink. Also, I do recommend that you have very cold water as your source. It's summertime here. My tap water is 77 degrees, and that's not cool enough to bring your whole, what they call wort, mixture down to the temperature that your yeast needs. So I actually have 5 gallons of distilled water chilling out somewhere that hopefully will be cool enough to bring this down to temp. And that's where your thermometer is really going to come in to know that temperature. So hopefully I got fairly cool water for when we put this in the fermenter. We are up to a boil here. This point where you do want to shut off a burner, especially if you're like on an electric stove, because otherwise this stuff will go right to the bottom and burn. You don't want that, because that will also affect the flavor of your beer. So I need something to stir with. There's probably a video out there of me using one of these too, doing the exact same beer. And you got to be a little careful with this dry malt extract because it clumps up. Okay. And probably having this whisk was not a smart idea because now it's all the way up here and I can't, it's not deep enough for me to submerge that, but we'll figure it out. You can also, if you buy Cooper's kits, sometimes you can get your hands on their own brew enhancers, which have DME and sugar and maltodextrin in it, and they have specific ones that they recommend for recipes. So those are pretty handy. I don't have access to those anymore. I did it one time, so I got to kind of just come up with my own mixture. So we're using 2 pounds of dry malt extract. This is Golden Light. They have different flavors of dry malt extract, different colors, made with different grains. And then a 1 pound of corn sugar, also known as dextrose. Important part of this boiling is just to get all these sugars sanitized and get them to actually dissolve. So we're going to turn this back on to let this boil a little bit and see if I can. You know, and there's lots of videos out there, I know, but I feel like I need to do good coverage of all brewing methods. So there we go. That helped. All right. Look at that. Got it all off. Actually, I'm going to keep this out for a minute. You do have to be careful when you're boiling any sort of malt extract or any malt. Well, sugar from your malt. Because the pot will want to overflow if you're not keeping an eye on it. And that applies to every method of brewing. Also, the liquid malt extract, since it's pre-hopped, you really don't want to boil it because it'll boil some of those hop flavors out of it. So we don't want to do that. We'll add that right to the fermenter once we get this boiled and dumped in there. And you can see that I have my 5 gallons of distilled water. We won't use all of it. I'm only going to fill the fermenter up to 5 gallons, maybe a little more. These Cooper's kits generally suggest 6 gallons, but if you do 5, you get a little more flavor and a little more alcohol. All right, so we are at a boil now. I'm confident that we've probably killed everything at this point, so I am going to just shut off because it wants to boil over right now anyway. But we don't need to boil anymore. We're done. Technically, I think these kits are meant to not boil at all, but since we're not putting the kit in there, it's the can in there itself, it'll be all right. But it's hot enough. It's been hot enough long enough that I'm confident we're not going to get any bacteria in there. So now that we're at this step, I'm going to take a drink of beer. I'm going to grab my fermenter here. I was going to try to use a clear fermenter that I have so you could see everything inside, but it seemed more realistic. You'd probably end up with this fermenter or one like this, kind of a bucket. And also the clear one was made of a different plastic that I was not confident pouring that in there would be a good idea. I've done it in these plastic buckets before. They're just, what are these buckets? HDPE buckets. Was that like high density something? So while my plastic fermenter is, I believe, PET, it's just a different plastic. It's a little more sensitive to heat. So I'm just going to use this. If you can find yourself a stick-on thermometer to put on your fermenter, that's great. This one actually doesn't. I didn't get one for this one. Here you can see the measurements, and if you get the light just right, you would be able to actually tell where the level is. So, all right, I'm gonna just a little squirt of hand sanitizer here, just play it safe. Make sure your hands are clean in the star sand or whatever, just to not accidentally contaminate your beer on your own. So, I'm gonna pour this in. There we go. Also, by pouring it in like I did, that's going to introduce oxygen into the mixture, which is very important. Get our can here. And generally, although I think they've changed the cans now, it used to be you had to open them from the bottom, so I just continue to do that, but I don't think you have to do that anymore. Pour that in. I also like to put really hot water in here once this is dumped out to rinse out the remnants, because this is very concentrated and a little goes a long way. Also, when you do that, make sure that you pour it back over the lid so you get whatever was under the lid too. You can see there's a little bit there. Be here all day if we wait for that. So we'll just give this a little stir to make sure everything is mixed well in there. Okay, and now we're going to start pouring our distilled water in. And this feels fairly cool. I have a special brew jacket where I can put bottles of ice in to keep my beer cooler, and I just use that to chill these gallons of water down. And they feel fairly cool, so should be good. And also all this splashing here, I'm introducing more oxygen into the mixture. So there's that. Plug is if you have nice cold tap water, you want to be able to get your mixture between like 68 and 75. Somewhere around 72. So your tap water needs to probably be low 60s if I had to guess. Maybe 50s. I guess I've never measured it before. But my tap water comes out 77 this time of year, so I can't really use it because I can't get this cool enough. Alright, bottle number 3. Should put us at 3.75-ish gallons. Also, if you use Star sanitizer and you get foam, don't worry about the foam. It's no rinse, so you can put whatever you want in with the foam. Just don't leave like a pool of Star San in a place, but the foam won't hurt anything. 4 of the bottles used so far. Okay, so I probably won't use all the last bottle. So let's go see. Oh, no, actually I do have. Huh. My 1 gallon bottles must be holding a little more than a gallon because we are almost to 5. I'd expect to be almost to 4, but that is odd. If you ever get in the light just right trying to look at these outside, you can tell where the water line is. And we're right at 5. I'm going to add a little more just because I can. That's the fun thing about homebrewing. You kind of do what you want as long as you don't screw up your process. As long as you sanitize and all that. There we go. So this beer was meant to be 6 gallons. This is called a tilt. This is a couple $100. But because I've been brewing for a while, I got one. I use this for my all grain stuff, but it'll work just as well as in here. So I'm going to use it. So I have now sanitized my thermometer just so we can actually see what this is. And we're at 76, a little high. I'm not too worried about it. I'm actually going to even check what the instructions actually say the range should be. I would like it a couple degrees cooler, but they say 70 to 80 actually, so we're all right. I'm going to put this in my chill jacket that I have with that ice that I was mentioning before, and that will bring the temperature down probably right where I want it to be. So what this device will measure is temperature and gravity. And gravity is your measure of how much sugar is in the substance, and you can use that to figure out alcohol. So now we need to add our yeast. This is what's going to make our alcohol in our beer. Okay. So just open it up. Some people like to stir it in, some like to leave it on top. I'm a leave it on the top kind of guy. Let it get acclimated to its environment and just let it ferment how it wants to ferment. Just spread it around everywhere. You could also just dump it straight in, but I like spread it out. And if it's fresh, it may smell kind of like applesauce. At least it used to, and this kind of does. So, next we got our lid here. Make sure that if you use a bucket like this, the grommet in it, that your handle is to the opposite side. Just because when you want to go pick it up, you don't want to hit your airlock or have to take out your airlock. You also need an airlock, of course, and this just helps keep things from coming back in, but lets any excess gas out. Because your beer's gonna be, the yeast is gonna create a lot of CO2. A lot of different airlocks out there. I just have one of these S types, and it works fine. They have 3-piece ones out there, among other ones. And you can put, I put Star San in mine, but you could do vodka or even just water works. It's not really a big deal. Just don't let whatever's in here go in there. Okay, well, this is going to sit for about 2 weeks, 10 to 14 days. And then I will actually keg it. You can bottle it. I'm going to do a bottling video from my 1 gallon kit just because I don't have a keg small enough for 1 gallon brews. So you compare that with this one once it's available. But hope you enjoyed. If you have recommendations for anything for the How to Brew series, like can you make a Cooper's kit better or something, you know what, we can try it. We can experiment with it. I'm hoping this is a fun series for everybody. So cheers. Catch you next time. Hi everyone. Sorry for the various audio issues in the video, but what you see on the screen right now are the readings that the tilt hydrometer read once we pitched our yeast. You can see the 1046 gravity, which will put us about 4.5% alcohol, assuming everything ferments the way I expect, and we were at 76 degrees Fahrenheit. So we did pretty good. Next little clip will be how you can tell you have fermentation.